Hello guys, it's been Emmanuel once again. In this video, I'm going to show you how to create a REST API with PHP, and I'm going to be using a library I created a couple of weeks ago, and yeah, I'm actually sure you're going to like this video. This video is actually meant for someone who has prior knowledge building PHP applications. And embedding HTML code in their PHP applications, which is actually a bad thing to do. Like if you already know, Facebook created React so they could prevent something from happening, something like this from happening, so you don't get to serve HTML documents or HTML pages from a PHP server. So I already have my project set up already, and if you want to follow along, then you would need to clone the starter branch of my repository using the link in the comment section below. So I have actually installed everything I need using Composer, so you can go ahead and initialize your project with Composer, something like this. Let me show you how you do that. I'm sure you already know how to initialize your project with Composer, but if you don't know, then this is how you do it. Init, and then you just follow the prompt, and if it asks you to install any package, then these are the packages I'm using here. So these are the packages I'm using. So you can go ahead to install these two packages. All you need to do is just get this name and then input it whenever it asks you to do that. Or maybe I'll just create a new folder and then show you how it is done. Composer init. And I will just show you how it is done quickly. Alright, so Composer init, and the package name, the description for my project, minimum should be dev, and this is a project, license from MIT, and then when it asks you if you want to install any dependencies, you can say yes, and then this is what I was talking about. You now get to type in the name of the package you're looking for, you wanted to search for. So it is serve my PHP. That's the name of the package. It's actually a package I created, so you're going to see something like my name / Bean Emmanuel / serve my PHP. And I think this is where I get to stop. And if you proceed with this, it's going to ask you the version you want to install. You can head over to packages and then install that whatever latest version I have already, and then if there are no other packages you want to use in your application, then you might want to quit. You might want to continue with the prompt without installing any other packages if you don't need any of them, and then this is automatically going to generate this file. I think if you haven't seen my previous videos, then you should go watch my previous videos, because I did all of this, and so I don't want to waste too much of time on it. So I will go ahead and start creating my PHP. I do have a configuration here, and what this configuration does is just turn on error reporting, and then include the autoloader from our vendor folder, and then load the .env files that I'm having here. So these are my environment variables here, which is basically my database credentials. So I'm expecting you to do exactly the same thing. Just go ahead, edit this file, and then change the credentials to your own credentials. And when it comes to the password, please do not use an empty password. You should create a password for yourself. You should create a user and a password. So I'm actually doing this just for this tutorial, and I don't want to waste too much time creating a user, although it doesn't cost any much time, but I don't want to do this. That's how lazy I am. And then you want to create a database to I'm assuming you already have a PHP application, and this video is just going to help you know how to write something even better. So here I'm going to start PHP here, and then the first thing I want to do is require my configuration file. So I think I don't want the configuration file here. I want to move it into the source directory. Let my configuration be here. Yeah, I think it's fine here, or maybe I'll just leave it where it is so that you have exactly the same thing and nothing has changed. Nothing changes rather. So I want to locate that, and now I have imported it, or required it rather, or included it, and now I have my configurations. And the first thing I'm going to do here is create a connection to the database, and I'm going to do it this way: database. So database is a class that the Serve My PHP package provides. So you don't need to do too much. All you need to do is just pass a configuration to it, which is basically the env, which is basically everything we have in the env file, because this is where we created the database credentials. And so you now get to use it in here like this, and then you want to select MySQLi, because this package doesn't work with PDU for now, although there's a PDU function that should allow you connect to PDU, but sorry, you shouldn't expect it to work fine because I haven't done anything for it yet. So and I'm not going to also advise you to use this Serve My PHP library for a production application, but if you feel you want to contribute to it, then you should contribute to it. Just head over to my GitHub using the link below, and then try to contribute to it and allow it to grow if you actually like what you see. So the next thing I'm going to do is create a router here, and this router takes that database, which is not required, but for some reasons I need to have it. So I need to add the new keyword in front, and if you see, we have multiple lines that's actually doing similar things, which is just using classes from the Serve My PHP. So I will just use this line instead of having multiple use lines or whatever it is called. And the first thing I'm going to do here is create a route, a get route, just to test things and see if it works fine. A function, an anonymous function. And this function takes a request, so request, and a response, so response, and then we have to close this end statement rather. So it's going to import response and request from the library, and so we can do it whatever we want to do with the response and then with the request rather, and then send back response here in this function here or method. And the last thing you would want to do to keep your application up is to call the run method. So with this, if I open up my my browser, and we type localhost 8080, we get nothing. That's because I actually forgot to start the server. And to start the server, this is how you do it. So I'm gonna hit this, and we have the server started already. And don't mind the zeros you see here. This is just a wildcard. You can actually replace it with your IP address, but I don't encourage doing that. I recommend using the wildcard rather than your IP address, because you expect this application to work on any server with any IP address, and the wildcard is just going to support any IP address that the computer has or your server has. If I refresh, we should get something like this, which is not what we want, because we want to actually serve the index. So I'm going to stop this, clear, and then cd into the public HTML folder, and then this is where I want to start the PHP server. Then if I refresh now, we should get a blank page that has nothing. And this is nice. It tells us that we sent a GET request, and that is actually nice. So if you're able to see that, then it's cool. But what this video is focused on is building a REST API. So we want to utilize what we have here to create an API. So I'm going to send a response, a JSON response back to the browser with a message that says welcome. All right. And if I refresh the browser, you should see the message welcome on the screen. All right, this is nice. It actually means we are progressing. Now the next thing I want to do here is create an endpoint to send data to the server. And let's assume I'm creating a user account, and I need to pass some data to the server to create this user's account. And the best way to deal with something like this is to send a post request to the server, and then grab the request, and then the response, so that you can send a response to the client, and then send a request to as the client sends a request to the server. So I'm going to get rid of this name so that we have an anonymous function, and then create a new endpoint. And this endpoint is going to be, let's say we call it API /add /user. So we are adding a new user, or you could actually do anything here, create any kind of endpoint here, but this is what I'm going to use. And here I'm going to create a new user model, because that's the only way to communicate with our database with the model. That is the best way to communicate with the database using this library. So if I clear this and then log into MySQL, and I use the database. So if we go to the .env file, you see that we have these as my database. It's actually a database I created sooner, so I'm going to use the database. In this database, there is a user table. So if we describe users, you can see that I have a users table here, and this users table has these columns which we can fill. All right, so what I want to do next is create a model. Rather, I'm going to create a model here. I think I already created one before now, so I will just add it here, but I would suggest you create your model yourself, or maybe I'll just open this up. I will just open this up and then try to create the model from it. So this is what the model looks like, and I'm going to create exactly what you see here. And for us to do that, we need to right click here, create a new file called user.php, and then we start PHP, and then create a namespace which is going to be called model. And the reason why I'm able to use this model is because I already created these here. So this is my model. This is where I defined what model should be. And so whenever I'm using the model namespace, then I'm referring to this directory. So automatically PHP should know that this is where it should go to look for my models. And I'll close this, and then I'll create the class. It's going to be called user, and it should extend a base model which the serve my PHP provides. And if you look here, you can see that PHP is already complaining, or the IDE rather is already telling us in advance that, hey, there's going to be a problem if you run your application. So because we need to implement these methods here that are missing. So I'm going to start with implementing the first method, which should be a protected method. So protected function, I don't want this body, and it's going to be called set table. And set table expects us to return a string, which is going to be the name of our database table. So this name should actually match the name of your database table. So it doesn't matter what database table you're using to follow my tutorial, it'll work perfectly fine. And then the next thing we should have here is the rules and make rule method. So I'm going to go ahead to the make rule method is going to be a public one. So I'll create a public method, and I'll call it make rules. And make rules here is expected to take an array whenever you call it. So this is going to be a list of rules, and then it doesn't return anything at all. That's why you see the void here. So the function shouldn't return anything, but what the function should do is to set the rules to a static variable. So I'm going to go ahead to create the static variable. I want it to be protected to the reason you're making all of these stuff protected is because you don't expect any of these things to change outside this class. They should remain the same when you use the class the user model. So this is going to be a static rules, static array, and there you go. So the last method we need to implement is the rules itself, and that is the method that allows us get the rules. So I will go ahead and create the method. I think it should be public, but I don't need this entire body, so I would love to create mine. It's a function rules. What kind of method should it be? Let's see. Let's go ahead. I don't think I can remember what kind of method rules. All right, so rules is a function, a protected function that returns an array. All right, so rules is a protected function, so it should be protected. And then if I do this, it should autocomplete for me. Then I can return an array, which is going to be the array that make function actually creates for us. So the make rules creates the rules, and the rules function allows us get these rules. although we can't actually get these rules, but it's something we have to define because the base model is going to use it in our application. Now, the next thing I want to focus on is this guys here. So I would just copy what I have there and then paste the code here, and I also suggest you write this yourselves. The reason, if you don't know why I have the question mark in front of this, it's because the type could be null or a string. So, and that's why I have it here. So, and that is all for my model. And if you compare what are these values you see here, the user ID, username, email, and password, we expect these values to come from our database, or the user would have to give us this data, and then we store it in our database. So I'm done with this file, and this is where I want to be. Now, what we want to do here is create a user, right? And so what we're going to do is create a user model. So new user, and the user actually requires something. It's not asking me to auto import these. All right, so I think I just automatically imported it, and for me to do that, I had to press control and then space for it to suggest, although I think it should automatically suggest once you type the name, and so you're fine. And what it requires is a database, and we do have a database, so we'll just pass our database which we created here to the module. But it's still not happy because it's not defined. If you know how the scope works in PHP, so this is a function, and variables created outside this function cannot be used in the function. So we would have to tell PHP that we want to use the function that was created outside of this function inside the function, like a local variable, and this is now pleased with us. So what I'm going to do here is when we create these objects, the user objects, then we want to the user model. Once we create the user model, we want to now add load the data that the user sends to us as a request. And so I will use the request variable to get the request objects to get the body of the request, and then this is now going to add the body here. We can actually see what it is if I decide to print this to the screen like this. So if we so you can use Postman to test your API, but I'm going to use Thunder Client, which you can install from the extensions here. Just go ahead, search for Thunder Clients, and you'll have this. And I'll go to click on. You can also click on collections to do exactly what I'm about to do here now. Now, if you click on collections, you get the options to create a new request, or you could just no, I don't think it's creating a new request. What you want to do is create a new collection, and then you can name your collection based on your application. So if you see here, I already have other collections here, so I'm going to name my collection, and I'll call it my app, and this is where I can now create new requests. And this request is going to be create a new user account, like that. So create a new user account. This is just to help me remember how to use my API. And this is supposed to be a post request because we created a post route, so it's going to be a post request, and we can now use our route http://localhost port 8080/API/add/user, and with that we can now add a new user. you add a new user. Since it is JSON, we have to go to the request body here, and then create our JSON and then send it to the server. So right now I don't need to create anything, but once I send to the server, you can see the user model object that we created. And if I do send some data like the username, what my username should be, being Emmanuel, and I go ahead to send this, you will see that we now have being Emmanuel here in the user model. But basically that is not what we want to do. Instead, what we want to do is use the user model to create some rules, to make some rules for the user to follow. And this is the saying that the username is going to be required. So we will grab the rule, which is an enum, and then do this. So username is going to be required, and we have to let our server know what is required and what is not. So those are the rules you're creating. You have to let the server know, what's the length of this particular field, usernames or passwords. So passwords could be not less than 4 characters or 6 characters, and you just create your rules here. This is where you do it. And we want the user to input their email address, and so we're going to create a rule for it. So emails are going to be required, and emails are going to be emails. So we need to make sure we do this, and this is going to make sure that our server-side application rejects whatever the user inputs that isn't an email. And then you might also want to make sure that this email address is unique. So no two users with the same email in our application. So I'm going to create a new array here and add the unique. Come on, unique. And if you do unique, then you need to pass a class, because it's now going to use, we actually need to let the application know how to query our database. So for it to query our database, it's going to use the user class. So our user class, that is what we expect it to use to query our database, and so you have to pass it here. So if it was a different class you want to use, you can just write the name of the class. Maybe we had a post class, maybe it's a blog, then you just use the post model and then grab the name of that class, and then it's going to use that to query your database to see if that field exists or not. And what's next for creating this? We just need a password, and we're done. We can create an account. So I am going to add the password here to the rules. Password should be, required. Passwords are required, and then maybe some more rules. This is going to be an array, and passwords should be required and has a minimum length. So we're going to create a minimum length of 4 characters. So our password shouldn't be less than 4 characters. It should be 4 or more characters. This is actually cool as it is. So we created our rules here. The next thing you want to do is now check if there are errors based on the rules we created just now. So the user mode, the user object has errors. So you're using the user object to check if there are errors based on the rules we created. So if any of these rules are broken, then we should expect an error from the server. So we want to send a response. So if there's an error, then we want to send a response back to the server. And this is how I want it to be. I want to have a key with the value true, saying yes, there's an error, and then the errors are going to be gotten from the user model. So errors. So errors is actually the method we created in the this is the method we created in this class when we defined the class. So when defining the user class, we had to create the rules and the make rule. So it's just going to give us an error when the rules are broken. And so let's proceed. So if everything goes fine, if everything works fine, and there are no errors or anything, then what you want to do now is save the data that you loaded into the model to the database. So we're sending that data to our database by calling the save method down here, and then this is going to save the data. And if it creates an account, it's going to return back an array, and this array is going to be the new user that has been created, added to our database. And so I can now create I think I need to use the return keyword here and here. If we don't use the return keyword here, there's going to be a problem. So we need the return keyword here so that it returns and not execute the rest of the code we're having below here, because we have an error. So here I will send JSON to the server, to the client rather, that is making the request, and I'm going to say error false. So here error is set to true because yes, we have an error, and here error is set to false because there isn't an error. And then a message can also be sent, like maybe created successfully, and then we can also send the user that was created. So that is it. And another thing you need to know is that the send JSON method also takes the status code that should be sent, the HTTP status code that should be sent to the client. And by default it is 200. So if we leave it like this, it's going to send a 200 response code to the client. But what we want to do is change the status code here to 400. And 400, if we run our code, you're going to see what 400 is. Well, let's go ahead and run the code to see what 400 is. So if I come back here and I click on this, we have an error, and these are the errors we have. So email and password. So you can see here it says that you need to enter a valid email address, and then it also says you need to enter at least some some number or more character. I think this is a problem I need to fix from the serve my PHP library. Now this is the status code I was talking about. You can see that it sent back the 400 bad request, which is really nice. So we sent a bad request to the server, and so we're getting an error. And so I'll go ahead to fill in the required fields. Let's say Emmanuel@mail.com, and then no password. If I submit, we get an error that says this is already taken, which is actually nice. So I'm going to change this to 01 and then try again. Yeah, it worked fine. We don't have the 01, so it's happy. And our password, my password is going to be 1 2 3 4, then bing. And if I send this, it's supposed to create my account, but for some reasons it says it sends back an exception from MySQL telling us that the user ID doesn't have a default value. So the big mistake we made here is not to create a user ID. So I'll go ahead and create the user ID because the package doesn't create, the library doesn't create the user ID for us. So I will create the user ID here. User ID is going to be equal to user ID. And there's an ID here already, so we can use it. And if I try again, things should work perfectly fine. And this is the ID we just created, and this is the user. This is the user here, and this is our message from the server, and this is our error flag that tells us, hey, there isn't an error. And you can see the status code is 200, so everything actually worked fine and it's okay. All right, so let's proceed to creating another route, and probably this route is the one we're going to use to get the users that we've created. And to do that, we're going to create a get route using API get users, and then our dir function. And as usual, I want to have these, so I will copy this because of how lazy I am, and then paste it here. Then we have this, then we have the function, and we can use the function to get our users. So to query the database for our users, it's going to be simple. You just create a variable called users, and then create a new user object, which is going to take the database, and then we can fetch all the data from the database like this by calling the fetch all method. This way you now have all the users, and we can send a response to the server as JSON. So let's see, error. Let's say error false, although it isn't actually required to always do this, but I don't know why I keep doing it, so I'm going to remove it for this one. And let's say I have like something like count, or something like length, the length of the users we have, and so I can call the count function to count the number of users that we have. And then I would want to pass the users like this, users, and make sure this is users. All right, so everybody is happy, and this is how simple it is to get data from your database. I'm going to try it out by creating a new request here, and then call it get all users. Then it's a get method, and my URL should be http localhost the port 8080/API/get/users. And if I execute this, it should get the users, but it says APA isn't defined. The variable 5. Oops, my bad. This is supposed to be app, and everything should work fine if I run this. All right, so you can see how it works pretty much well. Since this is a get request, our browser can actually send that request. If I refresh the browser, nope, I have to input the endpoint, and this is our users. So you can see I had previously I had some users, and now I have created a new one, and you can now see the data appear here. right? So there's actually one more big thing you would also want to do, which is authenticating a user. And let's see how it is done, and then we'll call it up for this video. We round up the entire thing. So to do that, I'm going to create a new route again. This is going to be a post route, and we're going to say API / authenticate our user. And then a function again. I'll copy all of these and then paste it here because of how lazy I am. Now we have the request and response, and so we can create a new user model, pass our database to a DB, and then we load the data that we get from the user. So every time you're sending a post request, you're sending data to the server, right? And if you send this data to the server, you need to now load it to whatever method, whatever model you're having, so that you can now use the model to communicate with your database and stuff like that. So I'm going to pass the request JSON body here, and now we're going to have the object created with the data the user is giving us. And next thing you'd want to do is also create some rules like we did previously. So I'll just copy this piece of code, or maybe I'll just write it myself. So user make rules, and the rules are actually a list of rules. This is maybe user name. So username, and username should be required. So if you need to log in, then your username is required to log in, and your password is also required to log in. So rules are required. Alright, so your username and password is required to log into the application. The next thing to do is, as usual, we check if there are errors based on the rules we created, and then we would return a response to the server. And this response is also going to be an array that says error is equal to true, and the errors are going to be gotten from our user model. So errors, and that is going to give us back the errors. All right, and if there are no errors at all, then what we want to do next is to authenticate this user. So we're going to call a method called authenticate, and authenticate is going to take some. I decided to let's call there's verify and authenticate. So the verify method isn't going to work perfectly fine because I haven't designed it to work fine. But the verify method is going to work fine. In the future, the authenticate is going to replace the verify method. So I won't suggest you use the authenticate, rather you should use the verify method. And if you call verify, it's going to just return back an array, which is going to be the user. So it's going to do the magic of checking our database or comparing our passwords for us actually the right way, so we don't need to bother about doing it ourselves. And then next thing I want to do here is check if I want to check if my user the user variable is empty. So the thing is, if it does the verification and there is a problem, maybe our username is incorrect or the password is incorrect, then it's going to return an empty array. So we want to check this array, and then if it is empty, then we want to return back a response to the server, which is going to say error is equal to true, and the errors, and maybe no error. Maybe we just pass a message that says authentication failed, or what should it be called, or maybe let's just say incorrect username or password, depending on the fields you have. So my fields are passwords and username. So if it was email, I'd change it to email and password. And then I want to send a status code of 401, which means unauthorized. And so if you send 401, it means unauthorized. But if everything worked fine and this condition is false, then we want to proceed to return a response that says error is false, and the message is authenticated, just like that, maybe successfully, and then we end this. And one last thing you need to also do is not just compare these, you might also want to send JSON web token, which at this point the serve my PHP doesn't support for now. It doesn't support creating the JSON web token for us directly. So you might want to install a third-party library to create your JSON web token. But I think this is where I'm going to stop for today. Maybe some other time I'm going to show you how to create the JSON web token, because that is actually the right way to create an authentication or verification system. And so with this, I'll just go ahead with the test. I'll create a new request here, which is login user or sign in user, and then my http://localhost: port 80/API/auth user, and then change the request to post. Then if I send, we get these errors here that says we should input our username and password because they are required. And then I will go ahead with the username. So my username is being Emmanuel, and then my password can be 1234 bean. And I think there is one crazy thing that has actually happened here. If you look here, you can see that this user being Emmanuel, and there's another user being Emmanuel, which is not cool at all to have. So we need to also make sure that we add another route to make sure that no two users are with the same username, since that is our means of authenticating the user or verifying the user. So we need to make sure we add that unique, this to it. So I'll just copy this rule and then paste it here, and that will make sure that whenever we try to create an account and I click on create, it tells us that that username has been taken and we don't have two users with the same username. So what I'm going to do here is I will want to delete one user and then stick to using one, but for the test of our login, then I will use Jane those accounts. So I don't know if the password is the same, but let's see if I click on this or write incorrect username or password. So let's say I try something else like 1 2 3 4. Well, let's say Jane. All right, so I'm now authenticated because I got the password correct. But if the password was wrong, then we get unauthorized as our response. So the login is cool, getting the users is cool, creating a user account is cool. Then we need to know how to delete a user account. So this is basically a CRUD operation we've just done here. So to delete a user's account, we need to create another route for deleting a user. So I'm going to say API/delete user, and then call the function here. I need to copy these. I'm lazy to type it, and I'm lazy typing it all over again. Or let's say I expand my screen so you can see it a lot better. And now to delete a user, we need this person's ID to delete the person. And so what we will do is this. So I'll copy this piece of code and then paste it here, because it's basically something that we've been repeating, so I don't want to repeat it all over again. So we create a new user model, we load the data we get from the request into the user model, and then we get the user model in this variable. Then we can now create a rule that says user ID is required. So you have to pass the user's ID for us to delete this user. And then if you give us the user's ID, then we can delete the user. So I'm going to create a flag called deleted. So this is a variable which is going to be true or false, and I will call the method delete from our user model, and then delete takes some kind of condition which is going to help it know where to delete this data from. So we're saying delete where the ID is equal to the user ID from our user model. So it's going to automatically get the data because we've loaded it into the model. So we can now get the user's ID and then delete the user. Then what I'm going to do next is send a response. So we will return a response, but before returning this response, remember I created a rule and I haven't told it to enforce this rule. So I have to copy this line, paste it here, and that is going to enforce the rule for me. Make sure that the user provides the ID. So if I try to send a request, if I go to the Thunder client and I create a new request, and I call it delete a user, and change the method to delete, and then https :// local host port 8080/API/delete user. So let's say I just send the request like this. You can see that it is already telling me that I need to provide the ID to do this stuff, and so I want to provide the user's ID and pass the ID here. Let's see, the user I want to delete is not create account, get users rather. And the user I want to delete is this user I created here. So this is the user I want to delete, just to prevent having two names, or maybe I'll delete this one just to prevent having two names. So I just copied that ID and I can paste the ID here. So once I'm done building this API for deleting the user, I go back to testing it. So here I want to return a response, which is going to be JSON, and I'm going to say error is false, and the message is going to depend. I think the error should actually depend on this variable, since this is going to return true or false. So it should depend on this. So not deleted. So remember, if it has been deleted, this is going to return true, and so we're negating the statement because there are no errors. So if there are no errors, then this should result to true, and then everything will be fine. And then the requested user is going to get false, which says there are no errors. But if there is an error, then this is going to be true. Deleted is going to be true. So the deleted is going to be false, and so we have to now convert false, negate false, which is going to be true. That says, yeah, we have an error. And then I think I'm going to do the same thing for the messages too. So if deleted, so if this is true, which means we had an error. So if we had an error, then we need a message saying maybe something went wrong, because we don't know what actually happened for it not to delete the user when trying to delete a user, or maybe when trying to delete when trying to delete a user. And then if everything goes fine, then we say deleted successfully, like that. Maybe I'll just break these, and then break this so that it becomes readable. Then I end the statement. This way we now have our API complete. So we have one to add a user, one to get the users we've created, and then the other one to authenticate the user, and another one to delete the user. So if I go ahead to test these by clicking on these, you can see that we get deleted successfully. So if I go back here where we want to, where I get to request for the users I have, if I request, you'd see that I have only 2 users registered because I just deleted one. And I think I'm going to call it the end of this video, and I want to appreciate you for watching this video. Please come back for the next video I'm going to upload.